Today, we're marking the end of Kate V Robertson's exhibition Post at Patricia Fleming's gallery in Glasgow, and we have the artist Kate V Robertson, and we have Fiona Clasen from the University of Stirling. And we're going to look at Kate's work and also Mary Martin. An incredible conversation between the artist and collector took place, and Mary Martin's name came up, and it's an absolute delight that we're able to show one of works by Mary in this exhibition, a work from 1957. So I wanted to preface the talk by saying, every time I come into this room, I'm reminded of the artist Kevin Hutchison, a wonderful collage artist who was on the roster of Patricia's gallery and a peer of Kate's. And he passed away suddenly when he was installing an exhibition here in 2016. And Patricia completed that exhibition for him and for all of us who loved his work very dearly. And at the same moment at GI 2016, Kate was showing in this building in a different part as well, with a really strong exhibition. And I have a little set of words from a reviewer, Chris Sharrett, who said, "In a part derelict former courtroom in Oxford House, Kate V Robertson has installed a wobbly, cobbled concrete floor made from casts of takeaway food containers and similar packaging. A large pink foam finger points down from the exposed ceiling. A full-size sheet of Financial Times newsprint is suspended above, its ends shredded. High windows are smudged with repeated fingerprints, the artist's, in whitewash. It's an evocative collection of interventions and materials that seem to speak of shifting priorities, changing times, disposable lives and ideas, a GI highlight." That was an artist newsletter. And it's that shifting priorities, changing times, disposable lives. The pandemic has affected everyone in so many different ways, but as an artist, Kate, you have produced a very beautiful exhibition here under different circumstances to normal, and I wondered if you would like to just open that up just now.
Yeah, so as you were saying, Graham, I do like to work quite big scale and often have worked in these off-site venues like the one you described down in Oxford House, near where you are just now. And that would have been my natural sort of way of working. So having to really translate that practice into my home environment during lockdown did present a challenge for sure, but it also presented a really wonderful opportunity. The types of works that I have made for the exhibition posts that you see here are actually ones I've been conceiving of for quite a while, and I'd been accumulating materials for years even. These CDs, for example, that I knew I wanted to make into a sort of mosaic form, but I hadn't really been able to sort of contemplate that as a body of work in its own right, or to think about how to find a form and a resolution for these materials. And it was really only the time that sort of lockdown afforded, and also that real urge I had to be immersed in a process and to be using my hands and to be actually physically working with materials, that I kind of found a real place for this type of work that made sense to me. And I think it was approaching these collage pieces as a sort of sculpture, as a two-dimensional sculpture, really, that kind of made sense to me. Collage is something that I've very much enjoyed in other people's works, in Kevin's particularly, as you mentioned. And however, when I've tried to approach it myself, I suppose I've been maybe thinking more about it pictorially or like an image, which isn't something that sits very naturally within my practice. But then when I came to be thinking about it of just moving objects around in a space and sort of thinking about it more as a sculpture in two dimensions, it just made a lot of sense. And of course, it then makes you sort of draw links back to previous works. And this was an exhibition I did in 2017 in Dundee Contemporary Arts. And I was very much thinking then and ever since about about how to sort of think about three-dimensional space, but across a two-dimensional surface, or very much making work sculptural work that was very flat, or on sort of on planes, and how that can sort of fill the space and occupy a space, and sort of also talk about kind of bigger spaces. So it just sort of suddenly sort of made a lot of sense. The new works, which were a very different scale, but actually exactly the same process. And this piece on the back wall here is just a big collage, really. It's newsprint pasted onto boards placed onto the wall. And obviously I was trying to create this sort of sense of an infinite three-dimensional space. And the floor piece as well, which you talked about, this is a different version of the one I did in Oxford House. The Oxford House one was the first one. To me, it felt so sculptural because it was involving mixing cement and making multiple casts. And, I was really wrestling with the physicality of those three dimensions all the time, moving around these heavy materials. But in actual fact, when the piece was realised, it is very two-dimensional. And in this iteration of it, I was concentrating a lot on how to make sort of pattern within, how to place these different shaped rectangles together in a kind of pattern. And it was actually a very, very similar process to this piece and this type of work. So it was really interesting for me to sort of be able to sort of trace back that thinking and that process. And also how it relates to bigger space, like the built environment, which we'll come on to talk about in a bit.
You've been using Metro newspaper, the registration marks off of them as a repeat pattern. You've been working away on a series of these in the house. Tell us about them.
Well, the registration marks, as I said, I've been collecting them I've been collecting Metros for longer because I've made other bodies of work using that. But I began to be interested in the registration marks, sort of symbolically, I suppose, the potential of those, but also thinking about how those kind of marks, different kinds of markers, like the fact that a Metro marks a sort of day, and how that reading the paper might mark a kind of a commute or a journey or a kind of structure of your sort of life. But I was also interested in them graphically as well, in this sort of repeat way that they've manifest themselves, on the wall behind you there. So as so often with my work, I sort of only seem to make sense of it when I multiply it lots of times. So I couldn't do anything with, one singular registration mark or a few of them. It was only really when it was repeated in quite a sort of maximal way that I felt, yeah, this is my work. And it was really just that elongated period of time, I suppose, that it takes to make them, and the sort of methodicalness of that and the repetition of that seems to really echo, obviously in the images, and that it seemed to make sense and resolve itself.
So up on screen now is an incredible work, a collage by Mary Martin from 1957, which Kate's exhibition is now closed, but it's been joined by this incredible work. A collector and an artist and a dealer in simpatico. The collector introducing the artist to an earlier practitioner who might be the perfect artist for that. Newer artists to glean from in relation to some of their current endeavors. And alongside, tell me what it is for you to feel like an artist, a forebearer artist alongside your work in the gallery.
It's just such a privilege. It's such a special moment and a unique set of opportunities that's been able to happen. I'm absolutely over the moon. It's actually been through this conversation that I've really learned more about Mary's work. I knew of it for sure, and knew that I liked it, but I hadn't really delved into great depth about it. And this has just been such a fortuitous and also really timely moment to discover more about her work. I really respond strongly to this piece more, more than any others of her work, which is just a great fortune, I suppose. So absolutely honoured to be talked about in the same context for sure, but also looking at her architectural works and reading about how she talks about approaching art and architecture just resonates so strongly with what the other pieces I'm currently working on. So it's just been wonderful timing.
It's time that we had Fiona talk about the incredible work of Mary Martin and the University of Stirling.
Thanks, Graham. Yes, I work at the art collection at the University of Stirling, which is extremely lucky to have a huge wall construction by Mary Martin. It was commissioned in the first years of the University of Stirling, which was a brand new university in the 60s when education was opening up to many more people. It was a brave new world of all kinds of things. The spirit was one of great modernity and openness. And the university at the time was very lucky to have the first principal, who was actually a scientist who came from Edinburgh University, Tom Cottrell, who was also a connoisseur of art. His mother was an artist, and he was determined to open the university and for the staff and students and for the public as well to as much art as they could have and acquire. And he just wanted everybody to be surrounded by art and culture, and thought that was really a great informal part of their education, no matter what they were studying. So the first building that was completed on campus was the Pathfoot Building in 1967. I'm just going to share some images now, which will illustrate better what Mary Martin was commissioned to do. So this is an internal shot of the Pathfoot Building, built by John Richards Architects in 1967. It was the first building, as I said, and all subjects and faculties had to be accommodated in one quite small building at first. This illustration, this image is of one of the courtyards and a very early purchase, which was of a Barbara Hepworth. She was apparently delighted to be included in this new building, and this purchase was supported by Scottish Arts Council. So if I go on to the next image, this shows the Mary Martin under construction. So Mary Martin was known about by Douglas Hall, who was the first keeper of modern art at the National Galleries in Edinburgh. He was invited to advise the university on art that could be purchased, and especially what was desired at that time was to have some kind of work of art for the dining room, which was used by everybody, by staff and students. It was a huge square space with a very large south-facing wall that needed to be filled. So Mary Martin was invited by the principal, Tom Cottrell, and she immediately accepted the commission. Tragically, this was really her last commission because she died in 1969. I don't think she even saw it in situ. Her husband, Kenneth Martin, came to see it installed. So as you can see, it's a series of aluminium planes which are arranged in a certain system. It looks at first maybe quite random, but Mary Martin had developed a system that was first used in an artwork that's now in the Tate called Intrusions, that was from 1966, I think. Before that, she'd used cubes and solid cubes that were cut through at a 45-degree angle. But here, and with Intrusions, the precursor to this, she started using flat aluminium planes placed at 45-degree angles. either facing up or down, or from one side or to the other side. And the completed result looked like this. You can see this is the dining room wall during the graduation ceremony. And the construction was placed quite low down on the wall, so the effect was to reflect the viewer and reflect the light from above and below. So it was 60 feet long, and it is still 60 feet long and 3 feet high. And unfortunately, as time went along, it got rather damaged because it was in this public space where students and staff were eating during the day. There were also parties at night. And it got rather battered during the 70s. So the people who constructed it, who I showed in the last image, Heggie and Aitchison, were based in Edinburgh. They were a joiners company. They had to completely renovate it, and it had to be put further up the wall in another space. And this is now in the Crush Hall, where it's still enjoyed today.
It's such a beautiful work. I've had the pleasure of visiting it a few times when I've been to the university. This Lawrence Alloway quote that I like, Mary Martin, in using some of the architect's materials, is using some of the architect's materials, but she is using them in a special sense, freely. There is an element of play which is no less strong for staying within limits. They are, on the contrary, the rules of the game. Her sensibility operates playfully, lyrically, within the vocabulary of building materials, but she gives the materials a different function. And I think, Kate, as you're working in a public art realm at the moment, looking at Mary's large architectonic work like that is quite inspiring just now.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things within that quote about using industrial and architectural materials differently definitely strikes a chord. So this is one of the elements that I've been working on with this commission at Clyde Place, which is across 3 buildings. And I guess you can recognise the pattern from the wall mural that I showed earlier, but it's in this time it's sort of been realised quite linearly, but it is sort of occupying the space of sculpture, and it is acting as a sculpture. But thinking about sort of the play between 2 and 3 dimensions, especially on this sort of super 3-dimensional scale of buildings within a city, it's been really interesting for me. But just reading some of Mary's quotes about her approach and what she thinks art within architecture should do. So she talked about sort of the artist entering into the architecture but without dominating it, and that the artwork should be a part of architecture but not being architecture itself. And these types of ways of thinking just feel really strongly resonant with how I approached this commission in particular, and how I wanted this work to sit within the bigger architectural scheme.
So I was wondering, Fiona, if you can see nice analogies between Kate's work and with Mary Martin and indeed the modernist campus of the University of Stirling.
Absolutely. Just when Kate was talking before about her own work, it really reminded me of Mary Martin's words about repetition and using small shapes over and over again in different ways leads you into different directions, leads you away from maybe just the logic of pattern into something much more interesting, and leads the viewer into their own imagination as well. Yes, there's certainly really lovely parallels between the two.
I have a quote that might be interesting, might be one to disagree with. It is simple to make a collage, and it can be done quickly. It is fun to make a collage, and at the same time it arouses suspicion. It is too simple, too fast. For many it is not respectable enough, and many label it as immature. And so collages are mostly done at youth, but a collage is resistant. It escapes control, even the control of the one who made it. That is its resistant character. To make a collage always has something to do with headlessness. Precisely that that is what interests me, because there is no means of expression with such great explosive power. A collage is charged and it always remains explosive. In the case of a collage, it holds true that I, as an artist, often stand dumbstruck before it, but it is precisely a matter of enduring this looking dumb. There is no technique more common throughout the world than the collage. Almost everybody has done a collage sometime in their lives. That is the associative element of a collage, that almost everybody sometimes in their life has tried to make an image of this world. A collage is something universal, and it is an opening toward a non-exclusive public. That's by Thomas Hirschhorn. His collages are dramatically different, but that non-exclusive public, I think that is work that you cater for really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the idea that you can make something out of anything, and those sort of democratic ideals of everyone having being an artist or having the potential within them, and it not being something that's to do with a hyper specialization or being uber skilled. But at the same time, as that quote says, it's not as easy as it looks. There's so many fine lines between what works and what doesn't work, and having to learn that and how that works isn't easy. But, really interesting quote, and it's, I think that's why I was resistant to using collage for so long, is because from the big installation pieces, I quite like work which is really arduous and hard and stretches me, and and it just, collage always felt too easy, but it's just operating at a different register and in a different sort of a different scale, but it's actually the same process, really.
It's to me, it's not easy whatsoever, and it's meticulous, and observing how you've made these and how our good friend Kevin made his work. It was painstaking, and it's heavy labor in a different way. It doesn't involve different muscles, or different muscles are used. We have to wrap this up now. When people get the chance, they must visit the University of Stirling and see Mary Martin's huge work. It is a majestic piece, and I hope this has illuminated people about how Kate's work is part of a lineage in art history, and it fits extraordinarily well with Mary's work. It's been a real pleasure to be actually looking at Kate's work alongside Mary Martin today. So thank you very much.